Okay, you're all set. Yay!
Awesome. So, today, for all of you, it's already Lag on the West Coast. I've still got a couple more hours. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Lag and a little bit about just the world situation and making the most of it. And I tend to keep things very practically step by step, take something away from it kind of focused. So it may be a little less Torah inspiration than some of the other speakers, but hopefully it's something that's useful for everyone to walk away with regardless. So first of all, thank you for having me. I want to just acknowledge that all of you that are here and taking the time in a world situation like we're in right now is just amazing. And that's kudos to you for being able to set aside the time to invest in yourself and invest in your sanity. And I know that's part of the speaking topic is staying sane. So that's definitely part of it, is just that sort of self-care. Obviously going into Lag BaOmer, we know that one of the main reasons that Lag BaOmer exists as a special day is because it's the day that Rabbi Akiva's students stopped dying. And so the Rebbe brings a classic question of how is it that Rabbi Akiva's students, the students of the man who was known for coining the term Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamecha, were dying in a plague because they weren't treating each other nicely. How is that possible? It's the klutz kasha that we call it, a classic question that the Rebbe brings. And he answers in a way of saying that all of them were so strongly associated with their interpretation of their teacher's learnings. They were so committed to their interpretation of the teacher's learnings that they lost sight of the kind of interpersonal relationship with the other students, and got almost wrapped up in their own interpretation of what Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamecha means, to the point where they couldn't even understand, they couldn't see eye to eye with the other students who were learning the same thing because their interpretation differed. And I think one of the things that we can really use this whole world situation to focus on, obviously beyond Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamecha, which is more important than ever with everything that's going on, really being there and reaching out for other people, but to take this particular lesson of Lag BaOmer and incorporate that into our lives in a way of, this is a great time to practice not worrying about the way that other people are doing their things, to not worry about either how they're doing it and whether you're holding up to that, to not worry about what they think about what you're doing, about what other people's expectations of you are. This is a really unique opportunity that we have, where we're turned inward, where we're focused in our homes, where we're focused on ourselves and our immediate families, to really zoom in on the way that we're doing things and not what everyone else is doing. Not look at what everyone else is doing, not judge what anyone else is doing, and not be worried about anyone else that might be judging what we're doing. So that's just one very practical lesson that I want to take away from Lag BaOmer. The next one is related, and that is that the other reason we celebrate Lag BaOmer is for the passing of the Rashbi. And the Rashbi was the beginning of the revelation of the Pnimius Torah, the inner secrets of the Torah. So that's what the Rashbi represented, and that's part of what we're celebrating on this day, is that we know that when a tzaddik passes, it's everything that they worked on in their lifetime coming to a culmination. And since Rashbi was the one that really started spreading Pnimius Torah, from the beginning, it's good. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything in chat. From the beginning of the Pnimius Torah, way before Chassidus even came into the picture, there was the Rashbi starting this, and because this is the day of his passing, we know it's the day that culminated all of his work on the Pnimius Torah. So that's something that we're celebrating today as well, or tonight for me. And so this, again, is a very special and very unique time that we're in, where we're focused inward, we're focused on the home, we're focused on ourselves and our immediate family, to focus on the Pnimius, to focus on being a Pnimi. And what does it mean to be a Pnimi? It means that we're focused on what really matters. And like, this is a unique opportunity that we have to drop the externalities, to drop the chitzonius, and to focus on what really matters, to focus on what our main priorities really are, and to not have to worry about keeping up appearances, to not having to worry, to not have to worry about the little to-do lists that just add up in normal daily hectic life, because normal daily hectic life just doesn't exist the same way right now. So to use this opportunity where our routines have been completely disrupted and to see that as a good thing, to see that as a chance to refocus and to reprioritize the things in our lives, to really focus on what matters most for us and for our family and for our connection to Hashem and to the Rebbe, and to like really focus on drawing down what matters most in a panemius kind of way. So those are the two like lessons that I want to bring from just the overall concepts of Lagveimer, since it happens to be relevant with the timing of this for bringing. Anyone have any comments or questions that they want to add before we continue on?
Well, I love it so far. Thank you.
Sure. So practically speaking, like, what does this mean? I guess like one of the reasons that this is a topic, this like staying sane with like through realistic expectations, one of the reasons that this is a topic that I'm extremely passionate about is because it's something that I get asked about all the time. And that's like, I constantly have people asking me questions of like, how do you do so much? And to give context for anyone who doesn't know me at all. Hi, I'm Rucheli. And right now I work full-time in a tech company. I also own a career coaching business where I now have 65 people that are in a group coaching program that I run to help them advance in their careers. I now have 2 kids who are at home full-time 24 hours a day with me. And I'm 37 and a half weeks pregnant. So there's just like a lot going on. And that's kind of just always been my MO of just do it and don't worry about, you know, not necessarily don't worry about what anyone else thinks, but don't worry about, thank you. Don't worry about the things that other people say you should be worrying about just because other people say you should be worrying about them. And so that's like something that I see as like a key to my productivity, a key to getting things done. Obviously, having an extremely supportive husband is a huge help. But I think part of the reason that he's so supportive is also because my expectations are realistic. And that is, you know, something that I've, you know, even prior to COVID coming in and taking our lives and flipping them all upside down, I've always been very big on. And it's just it's a matter of really, again, focusing on what our priorities are. And that takes time. That takes time to figure out. And that takes, you know, for me, I work in 90-day cycles is like how I organize my life. Everything I do is in a 90-day cycle. And if there's a project or something I want to accomplish that can't be done in 90 days, then I figure out a different way to break it down into a different project, because I know that that's a good time frame for me to focus on. It's a season, you know, and each season has its own feel and its own vibe. And if you're not like into the Jewish side of that yet, I highly recommend checking out Rav Pinson's books for like how the seasons affect the Jewish calendar and affect the way that we interact with the world. They're really cool. But each season for me in my life comes with a certain character and comes with a certain thing that I'm focusing on, and both in my professional life and in my personal life. That's especially true like once you start bringing in, you know, 3 seasons in a row of getting ready to have a child. So there's like all sorts of things that allow you to kind of like structure your life in a way where you're able to focus on the things that matter most to you. And so for my 90-day cycles, like I pick one project related to my work, one project related to my business, and one project related to my family life, and one project related to my personal own inner world. And I have 4 projects that I'm working on, and those are my 4 to-do lists. Like I have 4 items on my to-do list for the entire 90 days. And like everything else stems from those 4 items on my to-do list. That's how I've chosen to break up my life, and how you chose to like, how you choose to categorize things in your life may look totally different, and that's totally cool. But for me, that's what I found that works. And every 90 days, I go through this process of reconnecting to a vision of what I feel I was sent down into this earth, like into this world to do. Because we know that we each have a unique shlichus, we each have a unique reason that we were put on this earth, that Hashem keeps us and wakes us up every day, and we say Modeh Ani every morning because we're still needed here. There's still something we're meant to accomplish. And that accomplishment happens across multiple areas. So for the categories, for me, again, it's gonna look different for everyone. And this comes from, we'll go over, I guess, like a little bit of like a vision setting process. But for me, it's my work, my business, my family, and my inner world, myself. So those are my 4 categories that I focus on. And I have a like big project in each of those every 90 days. And all of my other to-dos, like obviously there's like daily upkeep kind of stuff that doesn't necessarily fall in like one of those projects, but like my big to-dos are all under those 4 projects in each of the, like the project in each of those categories. But really every 90 days, what I do before I figure out like what my project for that particular category is going to be is just reconnecting. And like, who am I reconnecting to? I'm reconnecting to myself. I'm reconnecting to the Hashem. I'm reconnecting to the Rebbe. It's taking, like, I take a day essentially every 90 days where I am the majority of my day. And this is something that I've worked out with my husband. If you have a family, it's obviously a team effort. But I take an entire day where I refocus and reconnect to what I see as like who I'm meant to be and who I'm capable of being, knowing that Hashem put me here for a reason, knowing that I have infinite capabilities because I am a piece of Hashem, knowing that and reconnecting to that every 90 days and using from that place, that headspace, to set up what I'm going to focus on for the next season of my life, the next 90 days of my life, allows me to drop what everyone else says I should be focusing on. Because when you're tuned into that place, when you're tuned into yourself, to your neshama, to your Hashem, to the Rebbe, and like I have like a whole like stack of books that I bring with me, and some of them are Chassidus, and some of them are more Musar books, and some of them are business books, and like I have a whole stack of books that I bring with me, and I'm just like flipping pages, looking for things that just like jump out at me. And it's hashgacha pratis, what you find every time you flip through a page, through a book like that. And there are just like certain things that like, this is like my message for this particular area of my life for the next 90 days. This is exactly what I needed. But taking that time to reconnect to that place where there are no limitations, where everything is possible, where like, like who are we to say that something can't get done when you're a chelik elokah and Hashem is capable of doing anything. And from that place of possibility, not from a place of circumstance, the place of circumstance is like, this is where my life is and this is what I've been dealing with. And so like, maybe I can achieve this in the next 90 days. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about connecting to a place of possibility, not a place of circumstance, where you're connecting to the infinite, you're connecting to Hashem, you're connecting to like the fact that really anything can happen, no matter what the world looks like. And from that place, setting your priorities, setting what's important to you, setting, you know, what your goals are. Even if you're not working right now, or you're not doing any sort of business related anything, you should have goals. There should be things that you're working to because they're important to you. And that could be it could be a family goal. It could be a financial goal as like a household. It could be something that you're working on in your relationship. But there are goals that you can set from this place of infinite possibility that you would never ever set otherwise. And the amazing thing about this is that it's not about whether you achieve the goal or not. That's not what it's about. Like, that's not the point of goal setting, especially when you're goal setting from a place of possibility. It's not about whether you achieve the goal or not. It's about the person that you're becoming as you work towards that goal. And so when you set a goal from a place of circumstance, where like, this is what my life looks like, and this is what my life would look like if it was a little bit better, so I'm going to try to go for that, then you don't have to change yourself to reach that goal because you're already setting the goal from where you are. But when you set a goal from a place of infinite possibility, from connection with Hashem, from connection to your neshama and to the Rebbe, and that's where you set your goals from, then you become a different person in the process of trying to achieve them. And it ends up 90 days later that it doesn't really matter whether you achieved your goal or not. Because the person that you've become throughout that process, like that was the point. That was the point of setting the goal in the first place, was to see how you can stretch towards that place of possibility, how you can stretch towards incorporating the connection with Hashem and the Rebbe and your neshama into your daily life a little bit more. And that's really like where my 90-day goal setting comes from. And you know, I have these 90-day planners that I work through, and the goals at the beginning of them are crazy. And like, you know, sometimes I accomplish them and it's amazing. And sometimes I don't, and it's still amazing. Because one of the lessons that I've learned is that either when we're working towards a goal, we either get the results that we wanted when we set that goal, or we get the lessons that we needed when we set that goal. So if we don't achieve the goal that we set from that place of possibility, it's not because we don't deserve it. It's not because we like are never going to have that. It's not possible for me. That's not what's going on. It's that Hashem is giving you a lesson that you needed to learn that you could only learn by not achieving that goal. That's what's going on. Are you comfortable giving any examples of a goal and how you went about it? So I have a lot of examples of goals, and some of them are still in process, obviously, because we're still living and evolving. So one is, for example, the business that I have, this career coaching business that I have. I set a goal a year and a half ago that within a year I would replace my 9-to-5 income. Didn't happen. That goal did not happen. I did not achieve that goal within the year that I originally had set. However, I can very confidently say that the 4 90-day cycles of smaller goals that I broke down to get me towards that larger goal have completely changed me in terms of pushing myself beyond mental and emotional boundaries that I thought I had, in terms of pushing me to open myself in to learn from all sorts of people that I never would have met if I hadn't have set these goals. In terms of, you know, financially, like I am in a different place than I was when I set that goal. Did I achieve like fully replacing my income yet? No, I'm still working 9 to 5 and also building this business on the side. But I have seen a lot of progress, and I've learned so many lessons along the way that, to me, I don't see not achieving that goal as a failure. And I think that's really something that, again, when we talk about realistic expectations, it's not that you shouldn't have expectations or you shouldn't have goals. It's that when you don't achieve the goals that you set, it's not a failure. And our ability to look at an objective event in our lives, there are things that happen in our lives, and those are just objective facts. But the stories that we tell ourselves about what those objective facts mean is so much more important than what actually happened. Because you can have something that happens in your life that you can create a story that is totally self-defeating, that totally limits your future possibilities, that totally disconnects you from the people around you that are important to you. Or you can take the same exact objective fact that happened and come up with like 100 other different interpretations that just serve you way better. And it's not, the objective fact isn't changing. The objective fact isn't changing. What happened isn't changing, but we have the ability, we have the ability to create our own stories that are going to serve us in a much better way. And when we tap into the koyach that we have to do that, to really look at a situation and say, I can interpret it this way, or I can interpret it this way, and they're both equally valid, so which one's better for me? That gives us so much power in our lives. That gives us so much stronger of an ability to stay rooted and grounded and connected and focused on what's important, to drop the expectations that other people have of us, to drop the expectations that we put on ourselves for no reason, and to really just zoom in on the things that matter, and to zoom in on the things that we can do something about, rather than the things that, well, this objective thing happened and therefore I'm totally incapacitated for the rest of forever. I like to joke, my father-in-law is like a very like doomsday kind of person. So like we joke that he like was preparing for COVID his entire life. Like his garage is like stacked with like emergency supplies and like all sorts of reserves of things, and like food that doesn't go bad for 45 years. And like, I don't know, it's like ridiculous. So we joke about like how his interpretation of events happening around him is like, everything is terrible and nothing can change. And like, we joke, my husband and I joke about it because it's so exactly opposite of like the approach that we're trying to cultivate in ourselves and in our children. It's just, you can't help but laugh when you see people that are so well-meaning in like how they interact with you. And like, you can let yourself get wrapped up in that. You can let yourself get wrapped up in other people's interpretations of objective events that are happening around you. You can let yourself get wrapped up in what other people say you should or should not be doing based on a given situation. And we've chosen to really, you know, especially when we interact with people like my father-in-law or like other people that have like interpretations about the meanings of objective events, like we can take a second and recenter ourselves, take a second and look at our 90-day goals, take a second and read a paragraph of Tanya, and like really just refocus on the fact that we are not defined by stories that other people create around objective events. And we're not defined by the stories that we ourselves create around objective events. And that's the whole concept of Madhyani. When you wake up in the morning, it's a fresh start. And the story that you assign to something that happened yesterday doesn't have to be the same story that you have about that thing today. You get to recreate your story every single morning, every single second. We know the world's being recreated every single second. Like, you have the opportunity to flip a switch and say, now I'm refocusing. Now I'm reprioritizing. Now I'm going to stay sane by focusing on what actually matters instead of focusing on what someone else says matters. We have that ability within us. So I just wanted to, like, I guess, give a couple of tips in terms of like managing expectations, especially now that like things are crazy. You know, like I said, I like live out of my planners. I'm really into them. So I know some people identify with that, and some people are like, I never want to look at a planner ever in my life. But for me, I think even if you don't do the whole planner thing, the concepts can be very helpful. And there's like a story that goes around the productivity world about like a professor. I don't know if this professor ever actually existed, but basically professor walks up to the front of the classroom and there's like buckets of like big rocks and of little rocks and of like pebbles and of sand. And again, I have no idea if the story ever actually happened or if it's just a story that gets told. But basically they like dump the sand in first and then the little pebbles and then the big, like the medium rocks, and then there's no room for the big rocks afterwards. And like they basically say, like, show you that like when you start with the little stuff, like you get to the big stuff, there's no room. But if you start with the big rocks and then you load in the medium rocks and then you drop in the pebbles around it and they kind of like filter down to the bottom, and then you drop in the sand on top of that and that kind of filters down to the bottom, suddenly the same amount of stuff fits. And like that's like a productivity story that gets you know, tossed around by all sorts of inspirational speakers, whatever. I butchered it. You can go look it up afterwards. But basically the concept is, again, like when you focus on the things that are most important to you, it's almost surprising sometimes like how much you can make fit into your life, because you start with the things that are most important. And sometimes you don't get to the sand, and that's okay, because it's just sand. It's just a little tiny stuff that doesn't really matter. And you know what? If my dishes wait until tomorrow, they'll still be there tomorrow. It's not like they're going anywhere. Like, to me, that is sand. It's not affecting the things that I've prioritized in my life as being like really valuable. And like eventually it'll get done. Eventually I'll get tired of looking at it, or my husband will get tired of looking at it, or I'll be like, hey kids, guess what? We're gonna do dishes, and it'll get done eventually. But the thing is to figure out what your big rocks are. And that's where my like categories and my like one project per quarter comes in. Like those are my big rocks. And then I actually like break those big rocks, those big projects up into like monthly goals. And then I break those monthly goals up into weekly goals. And I break those weekly goals up into daily goals. And the way that I do that, just from like a weekly perspective, I think can be really helpful, whether you're into the planner system or not. Because basically at the beginning of every week, I pick 3 things to work on across all 4 of my buckets, which means not every bucket's getting worked on every week. And that's okay. But I pick 3 things to work on for the week. And those are the 3 things that I've decided I actually care about getting done over the course of the next 7 days. And these aren't like big things. These are like, at some point this week, I need to make sure this little thing gets done. And it's really important to me. And I pick 3 things, and I have 7 days to get those 3 things done. And so at the beginning of each day, I have like a slot in my planner where I list out which one of those big 3 things I'm actually going to be working on. And sometimes I get to it and sometimes I don't. But if I don't get to that, then there's not a whole lot of chance of me getting to anything else on my to-do list, because that was my big thing for the day. And right now we have days like that. Like there are days where like work happens and my kids are going absolutely stir crazy and the house is a mess and I don't get to any of like my longer term goals that I was like hoping to work on. And that's okay. Again, it's okay, because we're in a crazy situation and life happens and like the world is upside down and we have to be okay with that. And we have to, again, look at what meaning we're assigning to that. It's not a failure if I don't get to that top thing that I had on my to-do list, because life happens. That's not a failure. It's just life happening. When I do get to it, I have 3 things. That's it for the entire week. Those are my 3 things that I focus on. And then I have 3 smaller things each day that are just like to-dos. And those are like my maintenance tasks. So I have like 1 thing that is contributing towards my longer term goal. And then 3 things that are like maintenance house to-do stuff. Like how do you only have 3 things on your house to do? Do I do more things than just 3 things in my house most days? Yes, most days. But I have 3 that I'm prioritizing. And so like if dishes have really piled up, maybe that'll be on my like one of my 3 smaller to-dos for the day, because dishes have really piled up and maybe I'll get to it and maybe I won't. But if I have a list of 25 things that need to get done around the house, the way like the human brain works is you won't get to any of them. Because you're just like sitting there looking at this like overwhelming list of like, I'm so far behind on everything. Like it just doesn't, your brain doesn't work that way. It is much easier for you to decide these are the small number of things that I'm working on. It's like, okay, 3 things I can do. Like 3 things around the house I can do today. And like sometimes you'll get through those things and be like, all right, what else can I get done? And that's awesome. And sometimes you won't get through those 3 things at all. But it's just much more manageable from like a human perspective. And it's much less likely to like totally trip your nefesh Bahamas up when you have 3 things on a list instead of like a list of 27 to-dos that you've been like adding stuff to every day and like occasionally crossing 1 or 2 of them off. So that's like whether you use a planner or not, that's something that I suggest. Pick 1 big thing that's like a longer term goal that you're working towards. That's like an action item for that longer term goal. And then no more than 3 smaller things that you want to focus on for that day. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to get more than that done, but it does mean that you're setting expectations for yourself that are going to be much less likely to trigger all sorts of feelings. And that's like something that we need to manage. That's one way to have that Mayach Shalat al Alev right now is like, if you know that a to-do list of 27 things, that just like opening up that to-do list is going to make you like depressed or anxious, don't have a to-do list with 27 things on it. And I know that about myself. I know that if I have a really long to-do list, just looking at it makes me upset. And so I just don't do it. I just don't have that list. I have a list with 3 things on it. And the next day, at the end of the day, basically, I write my list for tomorrow. Tomorrow, these are the 3 things I'm focusing on. You know, does that mean that I don't keep those anywhere else? Like, I keep it somewhere else that like maybe at the end of the month I'll look at to see like what I never got around to. But it's setting realistic expectations so that we know that we're able to maintain a certain balance in our day-to-day lives rather than going through this, I was so productive today and today I got nothing done and I'm terrible. Like, we can maintain that balance by setting like an expectation that is achievable, and then even when we don't hit that expectation or that goal, reminding ourselves that it's not a failure. We're not failures. You're not failures. This is just life, and life is crazy right now, and that's okay. So that's like my practical to-do list advice as far as maintaining realistic expectations, especially with everything that's going on. Any questions, comments, concerns?
I have a question.
Sure.
What are your thoughts about a like nightly checklist? So that's something that I do. I actually have it right here because I'm very much type A. But so I have this, but I struggle with basically having a feeling of, oh my gosh, like I need to daven because it's on my list, and so I have to check it off just so I can, get it done off of my list. I guess my question would be, how would you advise looking at it as something to show that you did things for the day, but not looking at it as like another thing to do on a to-do list?
Okay. So again, it depends on, it comes down to being emotionally aware. It comes down to being conscious of how you're affected by it. If you see that it's a regular thing for you to look at this list and be like, oh my gosh, then maybe it's time to adjust the list. Because that, oh my gosh, is like never a helpful reaction to anything. So having a nightly to-do list, it depends. Like I don't know what's on your nightly to-do list. Like I have like a list of habits that I like to try to get to at night before I go to bed. And they're like kind of like built into my like nightly routine. Do they always happen? No. But if I get to a point where like that list of things I would like to try to get to is causing me anxiety right before bed, it's gone. I'm not going to have that list anymore. When it comes to things like davening, it's really interesting. And this is a conversation that my husband and I have all the time, especially around like the kids. For us is like, we have like Tzivos Hashem checklists of things they're supposed to do every day. And I have really mixed feelings about it. Because on one hand, like, yes, you want it to be exciting and you want them to get the high of like checking off all of these cool, amazing, beautiful things that they did today. But on the other hand, is Judaism a checklist? Is our connection to Hashem a checklist? Do we want it to ever feel like a checklist? No. Our connection to Hashem should never feel like a checklist. And so we go through spurts with it. Like sometimes we're like really into the Tzivos Hashem checklist with our kids, and sometimes we're really not. And it depends on, again, being present with our children and seeing how they're handling it. There are times where my son gets really excited about checking things off, and he doesn't pay attention to the boxes that are unchecked. And there are times where he gets really anxious about the boxes that are unchecked, and we pause for a couple of days and we do what we can. And we go back to refocusing on what's important, which is the fact that you are Chelek Elokah. And sometimes the Chelek Elokah gets to daven a full Shachris Mincha Maariv, and sometimes Chelek Elokah says Shema once. And the point is that we need to focus on like, what are all of those things meant to accomplish? Like, what's the checklist meant to accomplish? Ultimately, the checklist is meant to be a list of ways that you're able to connect to Hashem and the Rebbe. Like, that's what the checklist is for. It's a list of possible ways to connect to Hashem and the Rebbe. And when we turn that list into like a source of anxiety, it totally defeats the point. It totally defeats the point. And that includes like having davening on a checklist, honestly, in my opinion. If having davening on a checklist is causing you anxiety, take it off the checklist for a while and do whatever davening you can do. Close your eyes for half a second and say, Abishur, please help me. Like, that's your davening for the day. That's okay. If that's where you're holding at this particular point in time, then that's where you're holding. And like, halakhically, if you close your eyes and say, Abishur, please help me, you did your davening. That's what davening is. It's asking Hashem for what we need. You know, so it's really, and there will be, especially for women, because we are very different from men, women operate in cycles. That's how Hashem made us. We operate in cycles. Newsflash. Like, and that secular nature of a woman, it looks very different from the secular nature of a man. Like, men operate on yearly and 24-hour cycles. Like 24 hours to 24 hours, they look exactly the same. And so they have like peaks and troughs in their day, but every 24 hours they reset. And like, that's not how women work. We reset monthly, or if you're in an interesting time of your life, like maybe every 9 months or every year or year and a half or 2 years, like it depends. Like, we have very different natures when it comes to how we, like what wavelength we're riding on. And so there are going to be times in your life where you feel so intrinsically connected naturally that like you don't even need the checklist, you're flying. And then there are going to be times in your life where you're like connected, but you need a little bit of a reminder. And then the checklist can be really helpful. And then there's gonna be times in your life where like you're stressed and you're talking to the Abishur all the time in your head because you need help. and like, a checklist is not helping me right now. And like, that's the nature of a woman. We go through these cycles. And our relationship with Hashem, our relationship with the Rebbe, our relationship with our spouses and our kids, like, we go through waves, we go through cycles, and like, that's okay. That's part of being a woman. And like, when we acknowledge that and we accept that and we come to terms with the fact that we are not men whose every 24 hours looks exactly the same, then it's much easier to be at peace and to have those realistic expectations and to have some of that like, just like sense of like calm with who you are and where you're holding and where your connection with Hashem is holding, and like to not feel like, oh, I didn't daven a full chakras today and that makes me like a terrible Jew. Like, no, it's where you're holding with your connection to Hashem right this particular moment, and that does change over time. It changes in a secular nature, and it's not like it's like, oh, I didn't daven chakras, so I'm never gonna daven chakras ever again because I'm a terrible Jew. No, it's just like that's the wavelength that you're riding on right now, and to be okay with that, guess what? Will get you back to a connected stage quicker than fighting it. When we feel disconnected and we fight it really, really hard, it makes us stay disconnected longer than tuning inward, looking at where we are, where we're holding, being honest with ourselves, being realistic and open-minded to where we're holding. And then from that place saying, what can I do right now from this place that allows me to express my connection to Hashem? And in my opinion, it's like something that took me years to figure out, and it's something that has completely transformed my relationship with Hashem and with the Rebbe and with like religion in general. But it's like something that takes practice, and it's something that takes time, because we naturally have expectations that we put on ourselves that aren't always realistic or healthy. And especially as a woman, especially as like once you get into the stage of being a wife and a mother, like that, you know, you go through crazy cycles in your life of being more on fire and more focused on practicalities and more connected and more focused on your children and more like, there's just like all sorts of different waves that are like coming and clashing and simultaneously, and like you have to figure out how to be okay with where you are, and from that place that you're at right now, what's one thing you can do? And if the one thing that you can manage right now is saying Shema before you go to bed, you should feel good about it. Say Shema and feel good about the fact that you said Shema before you went to bed. And tomorrow you'll wake up, you'll ask the same question again. From where I am right now, what can I do to express my connection to Hashem? And that's going to look very different from day to day, from week to week, to month, from pre-COVID to COVID, it's going to look very different, you know, and this is part of that concept of staying sane by having expectations that evolve, by having expectations that move with us. Expectations should not be static. Hopefully that helps, Eliana. Any other questions, things we can ring about?
I wanted to say, just in case anyone missed it, I think what you said about goals and taking the time to really turn inward and then looking at goals beyond what you think is your, you know, your ceiling, so to speak. And first of all, I want you to speak more about that, because I feel like if anybody didn't get that, that is huge. That is ginormous. And how the process of getting, even if you don't reach that goal, A, you don't reach it within your time frame that you had imagined. And even B, you don't reach it within any time frame that you know, could possibly have imagined. But the process of doing that changes you as a person, and it pushes you beyond what you ever thought. So I just feel like, I hope, please, everybody listen to this. And if you're able to share, I don't know, maybe share it and maybe give some practical, you know, like some examples for both in life of like somebody who's single possibly, or in life of somebody who's, you know, married, a mother. That way people can take that concept, which is incredible, and really live with it.
Sure. So just to like reiterate the concept is that there are two ways that we can set goals. We can set goals from a place of circumstance or a place of possibility. When we set goals from a place of circumstance, it's looking at our lives, looking at what we currently have and what we've been able to achieve up until now, and saying, like, given that, I think this would be a realistic goal. And that's one way of setting goals. And the other way of setting goals is turning inward, connecting to ourselves, to our neshama, to our sense of shlichus, connecting to Hashem, connecting to the Rebbe, connecting to the fact that we are a chelik elokah, which means that anything is possible. And from that place of possibility, setting goals that aren't necessarily realistic. And it seems like, it can seem like this is a contradiction to what I'm saying about realistic expectations. But the point with the realistic expectations is from a day-to-day perspective, focusing on what matters most to you. Not what matters to other people, not what other people say you should be doing or worrying about or whatever. Focusing on what matters to you, and then not seeing it as a failure if you don't meet those expectations this particular moment. That's what I mean by realistic expectations from a day-to-day perspective. When you're talking about longer term goals, you want to turn inward and connect to the fact that you were sent onto this planet with a specific shlichus, with a specific purpose, that Hashem wakes you up every single morning because there's still more work for you to do, that there's a part of the world that needs you, particularly you with all of your talents and all of your passions and all of your baggage, everything that makes you you, that there's a part of the world that needs you to come and fulfill the tachlis of that part of the world. There are people that you need to connect with still, and that's why Hashem's waking you up every morning. And that's why Hashem is recreating you every second. And from that place of connection, of knowing that you're here for something, you know, and sometimes that something, you know, in certain stages, again, we move in cycles. Sometimes that something is nothing but the newborn infant in your arms, and that's it. And sometimes it's going to be your kids in your broader household. And sometimes it's going to be a business idea that you've been putting off forever, but you know that you're connected to Hashem. And so it's totally possible that you can make this thing actually happen. It changes. We go through cycles. We go through waves. But whatever your particular mission is at any given point in time, reconnecting to that from a deep place of possibility, and from that place of possibility, setting goals, instead of from a place of, well, this is what's going on in my life, and so I have 2 hours, and what can I accomplish in 2 hours a day? That's a place of circumstance. So I don't know if you can see, like I have posters behind me. So the pink one says possibility. That's my reminder to myself of like, I am creating a life of possibility. I'm tapping into a place of possibility that is inherent in my nature because I'm a chelek elokah and Hashem is infinite and unlimited, and there's absolutely nothing that Hashem can't accomplish. So there's clearly nothing that I can't accomplish. And then this one here is, what got you here won't get you there. That's another quote that I have up there, because again, when we're setting goals, the circumstances that got us to where we are aren't the circumstances that we want to have in the future necessarily. You know, do I just want more of exactly the same the rest of my life? No, even if your life is really, really good, you want it to keep growing. You want it to keep blossoming. You want to keep finding deeper purpose and deeper meaning and deeper connection and like all of these things that are important to you. And that means evolving as a person and going deeper inside yourself and going deeper inside your connection to Hashem and to the Rebbe. And that's where this creating from a sense of possibility comes into play, is that by setting a goal from a place of possibility, one that doesn't necessarily sound realistic all of the time, that working towards achieving that goal shifts who you are. It shifts your perception of yourself. It shifts your connection to Hashem and to the people around you. It completely changes who you are. And so whether you end up actually achieving that not necessarily realistic goal or not, the person that you become through the process of working towards it was really the whole point. It was really the whole point. And so we set these goals that are stretches that encompass the sense of wonder and the sense of anything is possible because Hashem is with me. And we start to live that more in our day-to-day lives by working towards that goal. We start to see it. Bitachon becomes more of a real thing by you when that's the kind of goal you're working towards every day. Like, it's not an option. You have to start living a life of bitachon if you're working towards goals that are not realistic. And so like you evolve into a different person, and you look back 90 days later and you're like, did I achieve that goal? And you're like, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter if I achieve the goal or not. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Doesn't really matter, because who I am is so much closer to who I know I'm capable of being as a result of having set those goals 90 days earlier. I'm trying to see like what else I have up there. I have abundance. Abundance is another one that's up there. Spiritual and material. And then who do I need to be to do what I need to do to have what I want to have in my life? That's the other saying that I have up there. And that's like an interesting one that I think is related, that I guess I can talk about also. That this concept of, there are like two different perspectives we can be looking at the world. You know, we talk about like circumstance versus possibility. There's also a perspective of, and I think this is really intrinsically connected to looking at the world from a Nefesh Bahamas perspective versus a Nefesh Elokis perspective. That normally the way human beings operate, and this is again like a Nefesh Bahamas kind of perspective, is that the natural mode of thinking about things is that when I have such and such, I will be able to do such and such, and that will make me be or feel such and such. When I have more money, I will be able to do these things that I want to do, and then I will be happy. When I have more time, then I will be able to do more hobbies that I'm interested in, and then I will be more calm. And that's like the natural, like human way of just like kind of processing the different things that we want in our lives. The other way, looking at it from the other perspective, is basically flipping the script, which is, who do I need to be in order to do the things that I need to do to have what I want to have in my life? So if these are the goals that I'm setting for myself, if these are the 90-day projects that I've decided I'm working on, so that's what I want to have, and there are certain things that I need to do to get there, who do I need to be in order to accomplish those things? And that's going to, you know, instead of saying like, well, I'll be happy when I get there, it's like, I am a happy person. Because I am a happy person, I go out of my way to do things that make others happy. And because I go out of my way to do things that make others happy, I have relationships and friendships that are meaningful. Rather than saying like, when I have relationships that are worth investing in, then I'll go out of my way to make others happy. And then I'll be like, you see, it's like flipping the script. It's flipping the script. It's deciding to be someone that we want to be, that we know we're capable of being, before we have all of the things that should make us that way. Because like, you know, reality check, like doing tons of things to try to be happy doesn't actually make you happy. I don't know if that's like a news flash for anyone, but like being happy is an internal decision that comes with connecting to who you really are, connecting with the fact that you have a purpose in this world, and connecting with the fact that from that place of happiness, you can spread that happiness to others. That's what makes you happy. Like just trying to accumulate and have things and do things to make you happy doesn't actually make you happy. And it's the same for anything. If I want to achieve something crazy in my business in the next 90 days, who do I need to be to do that? I need to be courageous. I need to be fearless. I need to know that Hashem is with me. I need to be a person that has bitachon and emunah. And like when I'm being that person, guess what? Going and doing all the things that it takes to reach my 90-day goal is a lot easier. When I've decided that I'm a courageous person, then reaching out to a business owner that has $1 million business that I want to partner with doesn't bother me, because I'm a courageous person that has Hashem on her side. And that's not necessarily something that I would be able to do if I hadn't already decided who I'm being. And that comes from turning inwards, from connecting to your neshama, from connecting to Hashem and to the Rebbe, from reconnecting in a really deep way, setting aside time, like whether it's every month or every 90 days or whatever it is for you, but setting aside time and getting the help of your husband if you're married with kids, like setting aside a serious chunk of time to really reconnect to who you are and to Hashem and to what you're capable of and to your mission on this earth. And like from that place of connection, seeing the possibility, because then it's much easier to decide who you have to be. And from that place of being, then it's much easier to do. And when it's easier to do, it's also easier to have. It's also much easier to have that way. So that's the other saying that's up there. I don't know if you can see it or not with Zoom. It's like kind of blocked out, but those are just like some of the things that go on in my head when I'm working on goal setting and working towards crazy goals, and like how I manage to achieve and accomplish things even when life is crazy. And like even prior to COVID, we've been homeschooling my son since January. So like that's always been, you know, another thing on my plate, whatever. But like it comes down to really focusing on the things that matter most and dropping everything else. And if I can outsource it, I'll outsource it. If I can't outsource it and I can't do it, I don't worry about it. There's no one like forcing me to worry about anything. There's no one saying like, you must be concerned that your carpet is not spotless right now. Like that is not happening in my household. And I am okay with that, because I know that I have things that are really important to me that I would much rather spend my time and my energy focusing on. And so that's where I choose to put my focus, and that's where I choose to put my time and energy, and that's where I choose to put my expectations and my goals are on the things that I know that I've decided are very important to me, and that I've had conversations with my husband are important to us as a family, and that we've had conversations with our kids and it's important to us as like a family unit. And like it can spread outwards, but it comes from this place of turning inwards first, really turning inward and really connecting first. So that's my rant on that. In terms of, hear about how to break down the goals into mini goals and steps. So there's an exercise that I do with my coaching clients that I'm not going to walk you through because it's long, but I'll give you the gist of it. And I call it the Mount Everest exercise. And it's this tapping into what's possible and working from there. That's the whole gist of it, basically. And the concept is that if you're sitting at the base of a very tall mountain and looking up at the tall mountain that you're about to climb, it's scary, it's intimidating, it's overwhelming. There are so many things that have to be done. There are so many things that could go wrong. It's like a scary place to be, at the bottom of the mountain that you're trying to get up. And that's true for our goals also. If we look at a goal, especially one that's not realistic, when we come back out of our Vegas and we look at the goal that we just wrote down and we're like, oh my God, like, oh my gosh, like what am I actually gonna do to like achieve this thing? It's scary. It's a scary place to be. It can be very intimidating. So what you want to do is, while you're still in that place of connection, while you're still in that place of having turned inwards and tapping into a sense of possibility, you want to imagine yourself as if you're at the top of Mount Everest already, as if you've already achieved the goal that you set, and look backwards. So if I set a goal for my relationship, for example, that like at the end of 90 days, my relationship is going to be, so much stronger because we're going to have like fostered a sense of communication that we're working on. Whatever I set my goal is, like a communication goal for my relationship. Then like, if once I come down off of that mountain, it's like very like intimidating. Like, well, where do I even begin if like our communication's like not great? Again, this is just a random example. If my communication is not great and I'm trying to have great communication, like where do I even start? What do I do? We go back to like, I don't have good communication. So what do I do to get good communication so that I can be in a better relationship with my husband? Like, it doesn't work. But if you put yourself in a place of, it's 90 days from now, and I have an amazing open line of communication with my husband, what did I have to do to get here? And it's a visualization exercise. If you put yourself at the top of the mountain and you look back towards base camp, you can trace your path that you took up the mountain. And you can see exactly where you had to turn and what you had to do and where you stopped for resupplies and like all of these things. Like you can see that from the top of the mountain that you can't necessarily see from the bottom. So the point is, before you come out of that sense of like real deep reconnection, again, like my goal setting happens in a chunk of time where I am reconnecting and devoted to tapping into a sense of possibility and wonder. During that time, I look backwards and I say, all right, it is now, what's today? Today is May 11th. So it's now August 11th. Like, it is August 11th, and this is what my day looked like today. And I write out a diary entry from August 11th, 2020, with exactly how my day went and how my relationship looks, the kinds of conversations I'm having with my husband, the kinds of conversations I'm having with my children, the news I got about the business, the good news that I got from work. Like, I write down a diary entry from August 11th, 2020 of like my like picture perfect, achieved all of those totally unrealistic goals. What does that look and feel like? And then from that place, ask, what did I do and who did I have to be to get here? And so if it's a communication goal with my husband, then it's like, all right, so one of the things that I would have to do is I would have to let go of this story that I'm not great at communicating with my husband. If that's a story that we have, that's obviously not serving us. So sometimes it's things that we actually have to physically do. And sometimes it's stories that we have to leave behind. Meanings that we've put on things in our lives that aren't objective meanings or objective facts, but they're like subjective stories that we've started to tell ourselves. So sometimes, again, it's like very concrete, like, well, we need to have a date night once a week. That's something on August 11th that I can look back and say, like, we started having a date night once a week, and that made a huge difference in our communication because then it was just adults talking instead of having the kids climbing all over us. So that could be a thing that I do. And then there's the story that I'm not a great communicator that I have to get rid of. That's a story I need to drop. And you can start looking at the different beliefs and mental dialogues that you have with yourself and figure out which ones are serving towards that goal and which ones aren't. And from that place of visioning what a perfect day looks like 90 days from now, it's much easier to kind of break down the different things that need to change, both in terms of what you're doing and in terms of how you're being, if that makes sense. So from that place, basically from the 90 days in terms of like concrete actions to take, I say like, all right, it's August 11th and my day looks like this. All right, so if my day looks like this on August 11th, then let's zoom back like 30 days. And what does my day look like 30 days before August 11th? So like July 11th, what does it look like? When I'm well on my way to August 11th, I already know what August 11th looks like. So what does July 11th look like when I'm well on my way to August 11th? What have I already done? What have I already changed? Who have I already started being? What kinds of habits have I started? What kind of stories have I already dropped? And then again, zooming back 30 days. So now I have like 30-day chunks that I've broken my goal down into. And for stuff like relationships, where it's like a communication thing, you may not have like as many like to-dos. Like there will be some. You're gonna want to figure out how to schedule a date night. You're gonna want to figure out, you know, where the money is coming from for those date nights, or how to get creative with those date nights. There are things that you can do that are part of that goal. And then for things that are like more work or shlichus related, like you can actually break that down into things that need to get done by a certain time frame if you're going to actually achieve that goal on August 11th. So for me, if I have a business goal for August 11th, I'm going to have August 11th is actually like about the time that I have set for a goal for a new launch that I'm working on. But like if I have that as my goal for August 11th, then I know that 30 days I better be done with such and such and such and such. And 60 days, I better be done with such and such and such and such, or there's no shot of me hitting that goal. So there are some things that you can actually do in addition to like the stories that you need to get rid of. But the stories is a big one. And typically when I do this, like I write down like what stories do I have to get rid of in order to be the person that I need to be to accomplish this goal. And then when I think I'm done, I say what else? And then when I think I'm done, I say what else again, because there are so many different layers of stories and beliefs that we've let like just totally crowd our subconscious and totally cover over the Nefesh Elokis perspective of anything as possible. And it's like it takes time, and it's like a process to like start peeling those layers back off. So that's just something that like when you're starting to set goals that are from a place of possibility, realize that there are tons and tons and tons and tons of stories and beliefs that we've built up in our lifetime, from our parents, from our friends, from family members, from well-meaning community members, from previous lives, like who knows? Like there are tons of stories that are in there that we have to start clearing out and just giving back to Hashem. And like it's just this is something that is in my head. It is not serving me. It is not allowing me to reach my fullest potential. It's yours now. You can write it in a letter to the Rebbe, let the Rebbe take care of it for you, whatever works for you, just turn it back to Hashem and get rid of it. If it's not serving you, just get rid of it. So that's like just, you know, some more food for thought around things you can actually do towards like getting towards those not really possible goals. Any other questions?
I was wondering if you have any tips or ideas, or what you actually do on that time, you know, that time when you sit down, you go into yourself and you say, okay, you know, my greater possibilities, my greater goals, you know, because some people could sit down and say, okay, what am I supposed to accomplish? I don't really know. I have no idea, you know, especially when the sky's the limit. It's like, where, you know, how do I even start taking that on?
Right. So, I mean, for me, it starts with getting into an environment that is more conducive to that. You know, having 2 kids at home during quarantine makes that more challenging. But even if it means just like locking myself in my room for a couple hours, telling my husband good luck, you know, there's you want to make sure that you're in an environment where you're not going to be yanked out of whatever mental process you're in the middle of. So that's the first step, is really, for me, normally when COVID's not happening, like I escape to the mountains for a day. That's what I do. That's like my connection place. Like I feel the presence of Hashem in the mountains more than I do anywhere else. Like for people in New York, it could be find a corner of Prospect Park or something like that. Like just finding a place that you feel like more intrinsically connected, or if nothing else, at least where there's not going to be distractions the same way that you have in your daily life. And then it really comes down to whatever works best for you. So I put on like really calming, beautiful Adel Jewish music in the background. So like my friend Michael Klein has like amazing like string quartet kind of quintet, I think, kind of music that I put on in the background that just like creates like, again, like a space, an environment. You want to like set yourself up for as much success as possible by creating an environment for yourself. You know, I have like lavender that I find calming that I bring with me, and I have like my coffee that has to be like good coffee. Like just doing whatever you can that like, again, there's like concept of like, why do we have Nashida for bringing? It's like because you want to keep your Nefesh Bahamas busy while your Nefesh Elokis is doing the work that it needs to do. And so that applies to when you're doing this sort of like possibility focused goal setting as well, as far as I'm concerned. You want to have good food, good drink, be in an environment that's comfortable, make your Nefesh Bahamas happy, and get it out of the way. The music artist name, oh, I'll type it in the box. Michael Klein. I don't know. I think he has it on his website. It's called Echoes is the name of the quintet piece that he has. It's like a 6-part, it's like a half-hour long, and I just put it on repeat. Then for me, usually what I'll do is I'll start by learning Chassidus. Like I bring Chaim Miller's Tanya with me, and I'll honestly just like skim through it until something catches my eye, and I'll learn like the section surrounding that. I don't learn a ton of it, but just enough to like really, again, refocus and recenter. And then it's a matter of, I use meditations. I use like meditation sourced in Jewish sources through the Elevation Project. I don't know if anyone's heard of Rav Daniel Katz, but he has like all sorts of like sourced meditation techniques. And one that I typically tend to use a lot is basically you count backwards from 10 to 1. And that like 10, 10, 10, 9, 9, 9, 8, 8, 8, you count backwards 3 times each number. And you imagine yourself going inward further and further and further and further towards your neshama and getting away from the externalities and going further, deeper and deeper inward. And then from that place, counting from 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2 back up to 10, and that's connecting to Hashem. So first you connect inward to yourself, and then you connect upward to Hashem. And that's a meditation that I do that just like clears all of the externality and all of the gunk that's in my head out of the way, so that I can just spend time just like connecting and thinking. And then from that place, usually I'll do a little bit of davening. I bring my sitter with me and do a little bit of davening, which is like an amazing experience on the top of a mountain, but also in the forest if you go to the Prospect Park or wherever it is that you can, you know, your bedroom with the door locked and headphones on, whatever works for you. And it's, you know, from like I have a whole, like, I've done this several times, so I tweak it a little bit each time, and I have like a whole process that I go through of really reconnecting to myself and reconnecting to Hashem. And then from that place, I do a lot of journaling. I then like, I brain dump everything that's on my mind, so that none of it is getting in the way of any goal setting that I have. If there's anything that's bothering me, if there's anything that I'm worried about, if there's anything that I'm excited about, if there's anything that's on my mind, I get it out. I do a lot of journaling. And then I have my categories already of like where I spend my time focusing. If you've never done this before, then it may be worth time to spend like, you know, a serious chunk of time thinking about like, where are the buckets in my life right now? Like where, like, you know, we talked about like the big rocks and the little rocks, like, well, what's the bucket? So like for me, I have like a bucket for my work, and I have a bucket for my business, and I have a bucket for my family, and I have a bucket for my own internal personal growth. So what are my buckets at this particular stage in my life? And those can change and can evolve, and they do evolve. And like, you know, a year ago was when I added my business as like a separate bucket from work, because it's something that started to take more precedence and more priority. So those do change and they do update, but getting clear on like where are the focus areas in your life, and then spending time really, again, deep diving and journaling and connecting and letting it flow, not spending time thinking necessarily, because like there's like 2 different types of thoughts. There's like analytical thought, and then there's thought that just like comes to you. And we want to get away from like the analytical, like, is this realistic? Is this not realistic? Is this possible? Is this not? Like, we want to get out of that and just let things flow through you instead. And you find like when you spend the time to really like, again, recenter and refocus first, that when you get into a habit, I like to write. I think it's a really effective way to not think about things but still have record of them. And so like I have like I bring just a notepad with me, an empty notepad, and I just like pages and pages get filled during these like 4 hours. But for each bucket, I'll spend time just free flowing, thinking about like, what would life look like 10 years from now in this bucket, in an ideal, perfect, beyond possible world? What would it look like 5 years from now, 1 year from now, 90 days from now? And like, I work backwards like that, but it starts with this like big picture that doesn't seem possible. It starts with this big picture vision of like perfection that I know is possible because I'm connected to Hashem at that particular point in time. And so like, because I'm not analytically thinking about it, and I've shut that analytical part of my brain off for the time being, and I'm just letting it flow through me, I know that whatever coming out is possible. Whatever's coming out is actually like something that I'm capable of, that I'm capable of becoming. And then it's just a matter of working backwards from that place, 10 years, 5 years, 1 year, 90 days, and looking at like, all right, so knowing that like what's important to me and the mission that I feel connected with at like this essential broad 30,000 foot level, like, okay, zoom back in, come back down to like the 1,000 foot level, and what does it look like from there? So that's a little bit like around the process that I go through like during those 4 hours, and I'll do that for like each of the buckets that I have, and really again like refocus on the huge crazy pie in the sky 10-year goal and work backwards. And like sometimes that 10-year goal isn't like a goal, it's just like a feeling. Like, and when you're tapped into like a more intuitive, more connected space, when I go back and I read things that I write, they don't always make sense. But there's just like, it's just me like writing down like a feeling that comes up, a feeling that like really comes through like straight from Hashem. You know, this is a sort of davening that you're doing when you're doing this goal setting, because you're so connected and you're so tapped into what's possible, and to your shlichus and to your mission in this world. It's really a form of davening. The entire process is a form of davening. And so just being open to the things that come up for you, and you know, working backwards from there. I think it takes practice. It's not something that I was very good at when I first started. This is something I've been doing for a few years already. And you get to the point where you're doing this consistently every 90 days or every month even. And it's, you start to see things open up in your life that 2 years ago were not at all on my radar or possible whatsoever. So that's just like a little bit more detail on like what I do those chunks of time.
You are so awesome. Thank you so much, Rucheli. You like blew it out of the ballpark. So I want to, first of all, I want to thank you so much for being such an amazing person and sharing that with us, and also for taking the time, especially thank you to your husband for taking care of the kids. I always say behind every amazing person, there's the incredible spouse who's taking care of things. So a huge thank you to your husband for sharing you with us, and a huge thank you for making Living Chassidus possible, because it's all thanks to you. And I hope, I mean, I guess it is such a bracha to have this quarantine situation, because we're able to have these incredible speakers that don't always come through Crown Heights that often, but now we all get to enjoy the greatness of Rucheli even all the way from Las Vegas. So
yeah, and thank you. I'm glad it was informative and practical. That's what I was going for. So hopefully there's like some big, broader, visionary kind of stuff that you got to take away from this, and also just some very practical day-to-day, like pick your 3 and don't worry about it. And really, again, just take this time to refocus on what's important, and what, you know, what our internal priorities are. You know, this is a time of being internal. This is a time of pneumius. This is a time of really turning inward, and to really use that to the fullest.
you are the best. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And thank you everybody for joining. You guys are awesome for taking the time. As Rucheli introduced, it's amazing to take the time to really work on ourselves like this. So yeah, I hope to see everybody very soon. Have a wonderful night, everybody. Thank you, Rucheli.
Thank you.
Take care.
It's very good.
Thanks, everyone.